Good morning and welcome to the Paul Green Comedy Podcast. It is May 24th, 2024. This is episode 177. And by the way, I just released episode 176 about 7 hours ago. So this is probably the closest two episodes have ever been back to back. Last couple of days have been crazy busy. I've had a lot of work for the old day job and making sure I'm getting all my work done and all kinds of performances. And I mean, there's just so much going on. So much going on. By the way, if this is your first time joining me, this is a podcast by a dreamer for a dreamer. I'm a stand-up comedian and an actor. Going for some big dreams, and I do this podcast daily, really just to challenge myself to do something daily, because that is not always easy for me to do. And also, just as a way to communicate to anybody out there who has a big dream, if you're going for something, just an opportunity for me to share what I'm learning, what wisdom or lack thereof I am garnering on the way. So I am, again, a stand-up comedian, actor. I've had some very busy couple of days, both acting and doing stand-up and doing a podcast. So much has gone on. So a couple days ago, I had two acting gigs, which I've already talked about, where I was in a YouTube. I was acting in a YouTube channel, and then I did I did a murder mystery. That brought us to yesterday. Yesterday was a crazy busy day, so busy that for the first time in 176 episodes, I didn't actually get an episode out before midnight hit. But I still got it out before I went to bed. So I still consider it a daily episode, although if you look at the timestamps, I didn't get an episode out on March 23rd on the actual physical day in the time zone. But I did get an episode out around 1 in the morning this morning. And here I am again. So yesterday, man, so much. How do I even begin? So, I, again, had a bunch of work to get done for, the day job, which I got done. And then one thing that I decided to do is create a website from scratch for another podcast that I am co-hosting with the incredibly funny Josh Novey, and it's called Let's Have a Midlife Crisis. And so I created a website from that, and I just pulled up my laptop. And by the way, this was in between acting gigs on Wednesday. So I had this quick acting gig in the morning. I had a bunch of work to get done for the day job, and then I drove up to North Scottsdale in the late afternoon, and then I had a couple of hours to kill before I had to be at this gig. And so I'm eating at Firehouse Subs, and I went, I should create a website for the Let's Have a Midlife Crisis comedy podcast. So I pulled up my laptop, I went and found a domain, and the domain is midlifecrisispodcast.com, if anybody you want to check it out. And then I just started designing a website. Now, I'm not a great web designer, but I kind of know how to do it, and at least there's something there. Now, obviously, it's going to need to be improved upon and tweaked and edited, and, I just sort of made up a branding color scheme just sort of out of an image that my partner Josh made once, and he had this font color. I'm like, all right, that's our font color. So I threw all of that together in a couple of hours, and then went and did this murder mystery gig. And then I went home, and then I worked on it again for a little bit, and then ended up actually going to sleep at a reasonable hour. Then I had a bunch of work to do this morning for the day job. And then after the day job, I then went back. Well, not went back, but I went over to Josh's house And then he and we really just worked together for about 3 or 4 hours on all things related to this podcast. We just did a bunch of stuff. First of all, we had a bunch of really in-depth discussions about what we want to do with the podcast, where we see it going. And then we also ended up booking, while we were hanging out together, 3 more shows for the podcast. So we already have a show on the books at JP's Comedy Club in Gilbert. That will be our second live taping. And Josh is very well connected with a bunch of bookers. And what we wanted to do was book the Desert Ridge Improv, which is up in North Phoenix. But it's the same booker who books the Tempe Improv. So while Josh and I are talking, the booker for Desert Ridge and Tempe Improv got back to us and said, actually, we would like to do your podcast at the Tempe Improv. And he gave us a couple dates. And so just like that, I'm now a headlining act at the Tempe Improv, which I've been trying to perform at for 10 years. Now, I have performed there before as I did like a New Faces show. I had to bring a bunch of people to even be able to get on stage. And then I did, a buddy of mine put on a show there like 5 years ago when I was still living in LA. And other than that, for me to get into the Tempe Improv where I'm at now, I would have to kiss so much ass and schmooze and, submit tapes, and they would have to, and I would have to show up and have to do all this stuff. But now, because Josh is my partner, he's already a well-established comedian. We have this show concept, and we already feel so strong about it that it was literally an email, and then 5 minutes later, we're booked. And they're just like, well, here's the deal. It's on like a Sunday, so they're not giving us a prime spot yet. But they're like, oh, yeah, you can try it out, see if you can sell tickets on a Sunday. So it's like, now we're booked again at JP's, where we had the inaugural show, and it was so great. So we're going to head back there. And then we have a show at Tempe Improv. And then within about the same hour, I had reached out to a booker down in Tucson, where I do a couple shows a year. And this booker is fantastic. I've been working with him for about 10 years now, and he loves what I do. I did my last comedy special down there at one of his venues. And so I reached out to him and said, hey, instead of me just coming down and just being me, can we do the podcast for my shows down there? The Let's Have a Midlife Crisis comedy podcast. And I had sent them that in an email. And so while I'm hanging out with Josh, he calls me because he doesn't quite understand what the heck I'm talking about, which is fine. Sometimes I don't understand what I'm talking about. So he and I end up talking for about 20, 30 minutes, and he's super excited about the idea of us doing the live taping of the Midlife Crisis podcast in front of the live audience. And so just like that, then we booked 2 more dates. So we now have 4 dates on the books. We have 2 coming up in June, and then 2 in July, 2 in August. And then July, Josh has been working out has been talking to some connections of his out in Iowa. I guess Iowa has a comedy scene. So there's a chance that we'll be, for the first time, actually going out of state to try to produce this show in an entirely different state. So we're having all these discussions, and then we started talking about, we had a meeting with a social media manager, a kid I'd worked with before who's really talented. And then we actually filmed another episode of the Let's Have a Midlife Crisis podcast that we'll be able to release. So we do the podcast. We do a bunch of episodes just at Josh's house because he has a podcast studio in there. But ultimately, the goal is to grow a brand to where we can do the live tapings. And our ultimate goal, we actually set a goal at lunch, was to be able to do 100 shows a year of the Let's Have a Midlife Crisis comedy podcast, which that is a lot of dates. So that's 3 months out of the year. If you're doing the math, if you think about weekends, right? So there's 52 weeks. So 52 weekends. So that's pretty much 2 shows every weekend of the year, which, probably what will ultimately end up happening is more like we'll do 4 or 5 shows one weekend and then, have a week off and then be in the next town or whatever. Who knows? It's very crazy. It's moving very fast, but it just feel there's just this momentum and this energy behind it. And I feel so strongly about it that I'm excited about growing this brand of the Josh and I podcast. And it's not that I'm not interested in growing my own brand. It's that I just feel so strongly about this one that I feel like the best way for me to be successful individually is for me and Josh to be successful collectively. And there's probably a lesson in that. And my buddy Jim says this a lot too, who owns JP's Comedy Club. He said, Jim, I know you watch these, so I hope I'm not misquoting you. I want to make sure I quote this correctly. He says, in essence, that comedy often comes across as like a one-man show. It's just us up on stage doing a microphone, and there seems to be a little bit of lone wolf energy amongst comedians that they just feel they need to go do it and make it all by themselves. But Jim has said many times that he actually thinks, no, it is a team sport, and we need each other and we need to support each other, and that we can go further together than we can trying to compete against each other. If I understand his sentiment, and Jim, hopefully, if I'm misunderstanding what you were saying, maybe you'll correct me in the comments. But I definitely think that's true. I mean, even Jim, the fact that he has provided a show for me and a stage for me and a venue and support to do the first show there, which was, we didn't know how it was going to go, but it went so well that we went, yes, we have something very special here. And that was all because Jim let me do a show there. Otherwise, if it wasn't for that first show, we would probably not have as much excitement and energy and momentum to go now try it to kind of spread out from our home club a little bit. It's like, cool, well, it worked in Gilbert. Will it work in Tempe with, a venue that's, much bigger? And by the way, Jim, that's not an insult in your club. Tempe Improv's bigger. But yeah, how many tickets can we sell in Tempe? And then going down to Tucson. So one of the venues down in Tucson is the 600-seat theater. And how many tickets can we sell in Tucson? And then can we get these gigs in Iowa? And then how many tickets can we sell in Iowa? And, can we start actually selling out venues and getting significant revenue from ticket sales that we can really start to plan more tours and more dates, and then actually have some money to work with to so we're not out of pocket, because obviously a lot of the expenses are just out of pocket. Like all of the website expenses, I just paid for the hosting and paid for the server and paid for the domain name and registered the domain name and paid for the web builder and paid for the plugins. I just didn't care. So anyway, very excited. So Josh and I did a ton of work, and then he and I filmed. We did something very unique, and I'm so excited about this. So we did this show at JP's, and then JP let me have the names and email addresses of the people who purchased tickets for the show. So what Josh and I did is we pulled up that list, and there was about 17 names, And then he and I, one by one, filmed a short video promo specifically to that person, thanking them for coming to the show and then inviting them to the next show at JP's, just to see if we can get any repeat customers. And who knows how many will come back, but we just had so much fun. And that's something that I am really excited to work with Josh, is just trying to think outside of the box on how to connect with our audience and promote shows in a unique way. So there's going to be 17 customers from our show who are about to get an email with a link, a custom link to me and Josh, inviting them specifically to the show. So there you go. So, but all that is just a ton of work. So we filmed all 16, 17 of those videos. Now they're in a Google Drive, and I will be spending a lot of time uploading all of those videos to YouTube, and then emailing out the custom links to the customers who came. And it's just stuff like that that gets me excited about creating a unique brand for the midlife crisis comedy. I keep saying comedy. It's not the comedy podcast. It's just the midlife crisis podcast. The problem is I've been doing the Paul Green comedy podcast for 177 days straight. And so I can't say the word podcast without automatically saying comedy. Comedy podcast. So anyway, I am very excited. So after doing all of that work with Josh, so I worked all morning, worked all afternoon with Josh, filming all the promo videos, having the conversations, with the bookers, booking 3 more shows while we're together, and then filming 16 promo videos, we had about an hour-long discussion with a potential social media manager who might come on board and will help us manage all of this social media stuff we're doing. After all that, then I drove to Tempe to an open mic called The Chill Room, where I was invited by the booker of The Chill Room to do a 20-minute set at this open mic. And those of you who follow the podcast know that I have been working on a brand new set of material. So I was able to try to do 20 minutes of all brand new material, all this new stuff that I've been working on. And overall, it's going well. The flip side of this is I have also drastically increased my standards for my own material. And so I am really wanting to get a lot more honed and meticulous with my material. And so there's still a handful of it that I don't have pinned down word for word. There's still a handful of bits that I sort of had the concept. I think I kind of know where the bits are, but it's still a little vague. And I'm still more relying on my improv to work my way through the bit live in front of an audience, and sort of use my improvisational instincts instead of my writing instincts to really pin down, okay, I know where the laugh lines are now. I know what the setup is. I know the fastest way to get to this joke. I know all of that stuff. And so I did 20 minutes. I actually tried some new stuff as well, which went okay. Not good enough, but okay. And then I drove straight from there to JP's Comedy Club. And then Jim, the owner of JP's, let me do 10 minutes at the end of his Thursday night show right before the start of the open mic. And that was really, really great. And very grateful for that, because the audience from the previous show was still there. Now, some of them left and they had calmed down a little bit because the show technically ended, but then Jim came out and said, hey, we're going to roll into our open mic, but I have a, guest comic here who's going to drop in and do some material. So I got to do 10 minutes of that same new set that I've been working on, and it just gave me another chance to get some reps and to kind of fill it out, feel my way through some of these new bits. I have a bit that's kind of long, and I'm getting big laughs on it, and by the time I'm done with it, I actually usually get a round of applause. But the individual components of the bit, what I'm talking, and I don't want to give away too much because now I'm actually trying to be a little bit more proprietary about my new material. But I talk about the Little Mermaid. I'll just say that, and it's still a little too loose. I'm struggling, especially at the very beginning of it. I have to do this. I pretty much have to recap everybody on the plot of the original Little Mermaid because that movie's like 30 years old. And even the one that came out in 2023, I still think is close enough to the original that maybe people have seen that one. But I know a lot of people didn't like that movie because I think they had a black Ariel. So, all of the racist people in the country didn't like it. Something like that. I don't want to get into that controversy. But anyway, I watched it. I thought it was great. But the point that I'm making about The Little Mermaid doesn't land immediately. And so the audience actually isn't with me, which is okay. I just haven't found out a fast way to get them with me. Because the point that I'm making is a little obscure, and it's obscure intentionally. That's what I like about it, is that I'm taking this very old movie. I'm talking about this thing over here, and I'm saying, hey, The Little Mermaid, way over here, this 30-year-old Disney movie that was remade in 2023, and this thing way over here that I'm talking about, there's actually a crossover between them that I see, but nobody gets it right away, which is actually really fun, because then as I start to talk about it and say, yeah, do you see how it's the same idea as this seemingly disjointed thing? So by the time I get around to it, then the audience is loving it. And then again, they usually give me a round of applause when they realize like, oh, wow, yeah, he actually brought us through that whole thing. But there's about a 30 to 45 second lull where I just, so far, I haven't figured out another way around this. I just have to explain the basic plot of The Little Mermaid to remind everybody what actually happened. And it's very detailed plot points because the point that I'm making is referencing a very specific part of the movie, and it's not a big part. It's like this one little specific element. And the only way that I found so far to bring that to light is I have to just narrate. I have to give a lot of exposition. And I haven't found a way to make that. I haven't found like little jokes within that exposition because there's not really jokes there. It's just, here's the plot, and I'm trying to tell it as big and as energetically and as engaging as possible, but there's not, I haven't just found laugh lines in there. So they might be there, or it just could be this is one of those bits that just changes up the tempo of an act, which is fine. It wouldn't be something I would be able to squeeze into a 7-minute set. And, but I did 10 minutes last night and I was able to squeeze it in there, get all the exposition in, and then start reiterating my point. So anyway, it's just all part of this new material that I am trying to hone in and, turn into my new act. So I did all of that, and then I left JP's, and then I went and did some more writing, and then I came home, and then I realized I still needed to film last night's podcast, and it was almost midnight by then, and I still had a bunch of busy work to do and finish up. So very busy day. And today is going to be no different. I have a very busy day, and I'm going to be flying to Missouri this evening to spend the whole weekend with Elizabeth Weichert, filming content in a gold onesie, as you do. So everybody, just a very fun, exciting week. Lots of cool things happening. I'm very excited to start to see my new material start to kind of lock in a little better. And excited for the podcast, the Midlife Crisis podcast, excited for all of the performances coming up. All good, everybody. Just out there trying to live my dreams and do so as best I can. And that's why I do this podcast. It's just to report what it's like to have a dream and the work that goes into it and the struggles and the ups and downs. But then also I have weeks like this week where incredible things are happening and incredible people are coming into my life and supporting me and helping me and giving me opportunities and showing up for me in really cool ways, for which I am very grateful and have just a tremendous amount of humility and appreciation for, for Jim, for Josh, for Randy, who's booking me, and for Elizabeth, who wants to collaborate with me, and for my mom, who comments on every one of these videos to help my algorithm. I appreciate that. And for Tia, whoever you are, I still don't know who you are. And every time you leave a comment as though I know who's talking to me. I don't. Still don't know who you are. And you kind of made it clear that you want to keep it that way. I think you like having that power in this relationship, so more power to you. But it would be nice if I knew who you were, somebody from my past, evidently. But anyway, for everybody else out there, I hope your dreams are going well and that you are finding these cool opportunities and experiences coming your way. So I love you all so much. When I check in with you again, it will be from Missouri. And who knows, maybe I'll get Elizabeth to be on the podcast again. She was on an episode about 2 months ago when I was out in Missouri the last time. So very exciting times. I will check in with you tomorrow either way, and I will try to do so much better at getting these out at a reasonable hour. All right, everybody, I love you all so much, and I will talk to you tomorrow.